And it was just like this, ah, moment, because we were all just so happy to finally be back on land. What's up guys, Drew here again, and I have a wild story to tell you about today, about the time I sailed from Panama to Colombia. It's gonna be super cool, can't wait to share it with you, but first, if you could, please hit that subscribe button. It'd be a huge help to me. It would let me know you care, and I'd really appreciate it. So, as I was traveling down through Costa Rica into Panama, I knew that I wanted to go to Colombia, but I didn't exactly know how I was going to get there. You can't take a bus, which is how I usually travel when I'm backpacking, because there is no road. The Pan American Highway goes from Alaska to Argentina, but there's about a 60-mile gap in between Panama and Colombia. It's called the Darian Gap, and supposedly it's one of the most dangerous jungles in the world. At first that sparked my interest, and I was like, maybe I want to go there. But after doing some reading, I realized that I don't, and one of the reasons why is because that's a known drug smuggling route. Also, paramilitary groups are known to frequent that area, so I decided it's probably best not to go there. And so then my next option I thought was to fly. I looked at some last minute flights. There were around $200 to $250 from Panama City to Cartagena. I did recently look and saw that if you book in advance, they're about $100 cheaper. So that is one option. But as I started to travel through Costa Rica and Panama, I met a lot of travelers that were talking about this sailing trip that they either had done or that they were going to do. Basically, there are sailboats that go from the Caribbean side of Panama to Cartagena, and they kind of run back and forth. They're a bit more pricey, about $550 I think is where they start, and they go up from there. But the more I started to calculate, the more I started to feel like it was worth it. Here's why. So not only do you get your transport from Panama to Colombia, but you also get room and board for 4 nights and 5 days. That includes all meals. Also, you get to spend 3 nights in the Sunless Islands, which is an amazing place, and it's about $100 to $200 just for day tours from Panama to go visit them, and then you're spending most of your time on the boat. So I started to think more and more that I wanted to do this, and I started researching boats because I had heard that there's a big difference between the different boats. There's all different kinds of choices. Some are a big party, others are more chill, some are pretty luxurious, and the others are more economical. I was 34 at the time, and I didn't want to go on a boat that was going to be like a bunch of college kids and just a huge party the whole time, but I also didn't want to go on one that was going to be maybe older people that were just going for a leisurely transport. So I was looking for something that was more in the middle. And I actually, through my research, found one, communicated with the company, and they told me that they were essentially just what I was looking for. But the problem was the dates didn't line up. If I wanted to wait for that boat, I would have had to stick around in Panama City for another 5 days. Panama City is all right, but I wasn't in love with it. So it just so happened that I had to go on a boat that I had heard was a huge party. It's called the Wild Card, but I figured, you know, what's the worst that could be? I'll be fine. So the first thing I needed to do was get from Panama City, which is on the Pacific side, over to a small fishing town called Puerto Lindo on the Caribbean side, which is where our boat was going to be leaving from. But actually this was all arranged by the company that owns the sailing boat. They picked us up from the hostel in Panama City and took us over super easy. So we get over to Puerto Lindo, and the people that are going to be on the boat start showing up, and we're just kind of milling around waiting to leave. And eventually the captain walks in, and he is exactly what you would expect a rowdy South African captain to be. His name's Charlie. That dude is wild and amazing. So much fun. Anyway, he gives us like a pep talk, and we load our stuff on the sailboat and start sailing. We have about an 8-hour ride from the port we were leaving to the Sunless Islands, where we were going to be spending 3 nights. And everybody is just kind of introducing themselves on the boat. We play some games to get to know each other. I was the only American. There were some Brits, some Germans, some other Europeans, Australian. So the captain was from South Africa. The crew were from Mexico and Venezuela. So it was just an interesting group of people. But right when we got to the island after this ride, it was like dusk or maybe even was already night by then. People started turning up. I mean, they were doing body shots. People were jumping off the boat. There was this older German guy on the boat, and this poor guy, ended up being super interesting. He was cycling from Cancun all the way down to Argentina, had been through like El Salvador and had super interesting stories, but he was like 65 and was not down for the type of party that was happening. Eventually it started like storming. I'm talking about lightning and torrential downpour. The party only got more intense. People were jumping off the side of the boat. I hung out for a little while, but eventually I had to turn it in. But I was glad I got to bed semi-early because I wanted to wake up early. And when I did and walked out on that boat, it was one of the most incredible things I had ever seen. So the Sunless Islands are a group of about 350 islands off the coast of Panama. Most of them are uninhabited, but the ones that are inhabited, there's just like one family living on an island. And we just spent 3 days island hopping and diving, lying on the beach, lounging on the boat. We stayed up all night drinking rum, woke up early and jumped into this crystal clear water. It was paradise. I remember one moment that was really profound. It was late at night, I had a few rum drinks in me, and was just sitting out on the boat looking at the stars. And I was just thinking to myself of how we are in the middle of nowhere in these islands. If anything were to like happen to any of us, it's gonna be a long time before anyone can come and help. And that was a little bit of a scary feeling, but also it was so invigorating to just be completely off the grid. There were no cell phones, no internet connection, and it was just us out there on this adventure, and it felt so good. And the other people on the boat were so awesome. Everybody was cool and got along, and the crew was great too. They liked to party, but they also loved to cook. They made us amazing meals. At one point, they bought lobsters from some local fishermen and cooked those for us. We went fishing and we caught a nice wahoo, and they cooked that up the same day. Super delicious, super fresh. So that was paradise. It was like as good as it gets. And then we had to get from the islands to Cartagena. And that is a 36-hour ride on the open ocean. And I'll just say it was not fun. The seas were pretty rough. The cabins were hot and crammed. The bathroom was gross. And it just kind of seemed like it went on and on and on. I grew up on boats, and it takes a lot to get me seasick, but I was pretty close. I didn't throw up, but a lot of people did. So, ugh. And I'll never forget when we finally got to the port in Cartagena. It was the middle of the night. I wasn't sleeping because I was so uncomfortable, and it was just like this moment because we were all just so happy to finally be back on land. So here's what I'll say about the boat trip. Definitely be aware of what kind of boat you're getting yourself onto. Do some research, ask questions. You can even ask the captains or the people at the boat company like, hey, is this gonna be a huge party? Or maybe even ask them who's scheduled to come on this, what's the age demographic? So that way you know what you're getting yourselves into, because I could see being either disappointed because it's too chill or it being too much for some people. So think about that. There's also another option to do a similar trip. There's a speedboat that goes from Panama, it goes to the islands, and you actually sleep on the islands, really primitive arrangements, but you stay on the island, not on a boat, and then it's another speedboat. They actually take you to just across the border in Colombia. In order to get to Cartagena after that, you're going to have to take a ferry that is, I think, a short 1 to 2 hour ferry, and then an 8-hour bus ride. So there is another leg of the trip that you have to take if you do that option. All the advertisements are like, only 8 hours on the water, only 8 hours on the water. And I'm like reading that thinking, why are they advertising that? Like, I love boats and I want to be on the water as much as I can. I understand now why they advertise like that, because 36 hours sailing on the open ocean is a long time. And they say sailing, but they run the motor the entire time. So for that whole time, it's like, you know, the sound of the motor. So it's not sailing like you may be picturing it in your head. So keep in mind, I heard great reviews about the other speedboat option, but I mean, I had a great time on the boat that I was on too. It just is that long boat ride at the end that you need to think about if you're going to be doing this, because it's a lot. So that was the trip. I hope you found it interesting and informative. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I'll be sure to respond. And if you could, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel. That'd be super helpful. And I can't wait to see you again for the next episode.